Welcome to Speechies Talk About. I'm your host, Zoe Gilbertson, and this series we're talking about how supervision can be different. And this episode we're talking to Amelia Brunt. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Zoe. Thank you for having me.
So, Amelia, you're not a speech therapist, but you work with them in terms of interdisciplinary supervision. Can you tell me a bit about your role?
I can, yes. No, I am not a speech therapist, but I do work with a number of speech therapists. So this is how our worlds have collided, isn't it, Zoe?
Yeah.
So I'm a trauma and resilience informed clinical supervisor. My background is I'm a certified specialist in complex trauma. And so, as part of that, I work with professionals from a variety of sectors, including health, education, social care, therapeutic services,
Mm.
or anyone who works directly with traumatized individuals or traumatic content in their work. And of course, usually the two go hand in hand. So, through this model of supervision, we are working to really try and mitigate the risks of secondary trauma that people are exposed to when they work directly with traumatized individuals or within traumatizing systems.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So interesting. What led you to this role?
well, my way back when I was a primary school teacher, believe it or not. But from there, I went to work for a virtual school for children in the care system. So that's for those listeners who might not be aware of it. A virtual school is a local authority service responsible for the educational success of children in care.
Mm.
And actually broader than that now, any child with a social worker. So, through those years, 14 years at the virtual school, I was supervising education staff and obviously developing my own knowledge and wisdom and experiences around understanding complex trauma.
Mm.
And so, when I left the virtual school, I actually had a real bee in my bonnet about the lack of good quality trauma informed supervision for professionals, particularly
Mm.
education staff at that time. And so I went and trained in clinical supervision myself. And so for the last 4 years, I've worked independently as a clinical supervisor for a range of professionals.
Wow. So interesting. But if you hadn't come to this role, what do you think you might have been?
Oh, Zoe, it's so funny you asked me that. And I know this sounds like I'm just saying this, but honestly, now I've been exposed to speech and language therapy, I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I went into being a teacher because that's what I knew about.
Yeah.
Actually, if I'd known that this was a profession, I definitely would have pursued that because now I work with people in that area. When you work, there's a culture in
Mm.
different professions, and I'm really exposed to that through working with different sectors, and the culture of speech and language therapy is just is a very it's very different to education, and it's very lovely.
Mm.
And I'm very excited to say that my daughter has just started a speech and language therapy degree, so
Yeah. Oh,
I'm really excited for
fantastic.
her. And I'm just gonna vicariously soak all that up and
Yeah.
get the learning through her. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. That's very exciting. Um, so coming back to your role as a clinical supervisor, what do you think is the added value of sort of interdisciplinary supervision,
Mm.
especially, bringing in this trauma and resilience uh, theme?
Yeah. I mean, I think that because your work as a speech and language therapist is clinical work,
Mm.
it obviously you need your clinical supervision to look at the process and the practice of your work with somebody else who is experienced and senior in that role. And that's kind of a non-negotiable really. But having said that, the additionality or the complementary aspects of its interdisciplinary supervision
Mm.
mean that you also get this wider lens. If we think about supervision being vision that is super, that a wide, broad lens. And what happens, I work with, let's just use therapy as an example. So I work with psychotherapists of
Mm.
different persuasions. So let's just imagine an art psychotherapist. They're very, very deep in their world as an art psychotherapist. To have conversations with me in supervision, it shines light on different aspects of their work that they might not think about,
Mm.
particularly around attachment and trauma.
Mm.
Um, and in most supervision conversations, when we work this way, we draw out really experiences which are universal to human beings,
Yeah.
whichever sector we work in. So we're able to really unearth some challenges in the work that we're doing that we might not see if we're just looking at it from our kind of our professional sector lens, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, we
Yeah.
can get very detailed into our own areas of knowledge, but actually having a different perspective might open some doors or make us think of it in a different way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you're saying that, I'm thinking about conversation. I often end up, when I'm supervising people who are not teachers, for
Mm.
example, which is obviously my historic background. The conversation will often come to, oh, I hadn't thought about it like that, because my
Yeah.
my natural instinct is to bring a sort of trauma informed polyvagal an attachment lens to the
Mm.
conversation and thinking about the client from that perspective. What were they bringing to the table, and why was that disruptive or distressing? Those sorts
Yeah.
of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, there's obviously all those positives to interdisciplinary supervision. Can you see any challenges that are specific to it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, that we were talking before we recorded, weren't we, about the different aspects of whether you are employed by, say, the
Mm.
NHS and you've got no control over who supervises you, versus independent practitioners
Mm.
who've got freedom around who supervises them.
Yeah.
So that can be an issue, and we might delve into that a little bit more later. But I would say, the greatest challenge for both parties, supervisee and supervisor, is that you are specialists in different areas. So
Mm.
that brings positive benefits, but it also brings a vulnerability, I think, and a need to be really open about what it is what your specialist areas are and what you might not be aware of. And
Yeah.
so vulnerability on both parts really, I think is quite significant. But for me, that makes the supervision relationship even better. I
Mm.
think that honest, open, trusting conversation is
Mm.
what makes it trauma informed.
Yeah.
I think I think it's really um, it's it's important that we feel comfortable enough to ask questions when we don't understand. That's how
Yeah.
we learn.
Absolutely. And you make a really good point there that sometimes, within our workplace, we have a clinical supervisor that comes
Mm.
within the hierarchy of that role. But actually seeking that external supervision, which may be interdisciplinary to bring a different lens, is a really good complementary supervision or
Yeah,
part of your continued professional development. And framing it like that, not a replacement for what's happening within the workplace, but perhaps a CPD opportunity, either as a one-off
yeah,
or as an ongoing relationship, because it's so valuable, isn't it?
yeah. I agree, Zoe. I mean, when I worked at the virtual school, I had supervision as part of my role. But it was very much the sort of supervision that lots of your therapists will receive if they're working in an organization, which
Mhm.
is management oversight, making sure
Mhm.
that the clinical decisions are accurate. There was very little room for exploration of the impact of the work on me.
Mhm.
And actually, over the years, 14 years of working very deeply in trauma meant that
Mhm.
I needed a more trauma-informed clinical approach to the work I was doing.
Yeah.
And so at that time for me, I decided to seek out additional supervision to support me with that. Um, but and now in my own work, I have two individual supervisors that give me different things.
Yeah.
I access two different types of supervision and also a group supervision I attend on a monthly basis as well. Because exactly like you said, Zoe, this is about CPD as well as well-being. It's about
Mhm.
professional development, um, as well as being on a personal development level.
Yeah.
So there's so much to gain from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the resilience as well, isn't there, that comes within having more of a network um
Yes,
of
absolutely.
yeah. And what
Yeah.
do you think, when you look back, what have been your most positive experiences, either giving or receiving supervision?
Mm. Yeah, I don't know if I'm a bit sad. I absolutely love supervision. This is why I went off and trained to understand it
Yeah.
better and develop my practice. I love giving supervision. I love receiving supervision. I think for me, the greatest positive experience of it is the growth, the
Mm.
personal and professional growth for both parties.
Yeah.
I I learn from every session that I do,
Yeah.
and I hope that my clients do as well. I think they do. Certainly the
Yeah.
feedback I get. But yeah, the fact that both people, that the relationship benefits both people and the outcomes of that relationship benefit both.
Yeah.
And of course, whether you're a teacher or a speech and language therapist or a arts therapist or a psychologist, whatever work you do, this is about relationships. All of the work we do is relational. And
Yeah.
so the supervision relationship is a really powerful model
Mm.
of a health, how to do healthy relationship, I think.
Mm.
And that's not, we probably haven't got time to go into the detail of that too much today, but just to highlight really that that doesn't mean it's always rosy and you always get on. The
No.
point of the relationship is that we challenge practice and decision making
Mm.
and thinking about the work we're doing, but that's done in a safe, contained attachment relationship, much like good parenting would be,
Mm.
like good enough parenting, where we can disagree and we can find resolution, and
Yeah.
both of us benefit from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And thinking a bit about that, has there been a time it hasn't gone well? And how did you respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually being in a supervision session when you work with through this polyvagal attachment trauma informed lens, you we're very my work is very much about me being very attuned to my own nervous system
Mm.
and attuned to the nervous system of the person sitting with me. And the vast majority of the work I do now is online. So I
Mm.
do some face-to-face work in my locality, but I work with people all over the country, and in fact, internationally as well. Just that's the benefit of being able to do these things online now, isn't it?
Mm.
So I've had to really hone my skills of tuning into different people's nervous systems, even across the internet, and so in doing that, I have to really unpick what's my stuff and what's their stuff,
Mm.
and so it can be challenging sometimes because it's when you're working in this way and being and acknowledging nervous system states, you're you are exposing yourself to dysregulation, other people's dysregulation. So it's really important that you're skilled and aware enough to manage that
Mm.
and know what's yours and what's theirs.
Yeah.
So there's lots of, I can tell you, I won't, but I could tell you lots of times where that's been distressing for me because I'm hearing stories and tales which might resonate with
Mm,
my own previous experiences or things I've heard about previously in my work, for example.
mm.
So, um,
What
if
tools
that's,
then?
what, sorry, I was just going to say what that means is your own supervisor. When you are a
Mm,
supervisor, your own supervision has to be excellent. It's really worth seeking out excellent supervision for yourself if you're supervising others.
yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to ask was the tools you use. And yeah, your supervision of supervision is one of those
Yes.
biggest tools, isn't it? To
Yeah, yeah.
lean
I mean,
on.
I'm trained in a whole range of different therapeutic modalities. Not that I'm not a therapist, and I'm not registered as a therapist, but I have done a lot of therapeutic trainings
Mm,
with, you know, world leaders in trauma-informed practice, and that work enables me to have the tools to be self-aware enough of my own nervous system and to make sure I build in regulatory practices on a daily basis, to make sure that I'm in a good place for supervision.
mm,
So the phrase that always comes to mind for me is that supervision needs to be good enough from the attachment language of good enough parenting. The
mm,
supervision needs to be good enough. And what that means is nobody's perfect. Nobody ever can be perfect, but we can do the work to make sure that what we offer
mm.
is good enough for the client that we're working with.
Yeah. And obviously, your area of specialism is being trauma informed and the supervision being trauma informed and responsive.
Mm.
Why is that so important, do you think, to supervisory relationships?
I mean, for me, I wish that that was the only type of supervision people had.
Mm,
Yes, clinical speech and language supervision, but with a trauma-informed lens to it, because we're all, the world we're now working in is so very much more challenging than it ever was. I think that the kind of systemic realities and the psychological realities of the work we do mean that we're all so much more vulnerable to in terms of our own mental health and sustainability of our capacity.
mm,
Um, so, what a trauma-informed approach kind of lens brings is really emphasizing the safety and the trust within the supervision relationship. One my own history of supervision when I worked in the public sector was that it wasn't the quality that I needed. It didn't give me what I needed.
mm,
It was very much a tick box exercise. And it's interesting that unfortunately a lot of the research that's been done into people's experiences of supervision has really highlighted that 93% in one study, suggesting that the supervisee felt that that supervision was inadequate. That was the language they used, inadequate.
oh,
And I think what that
yeah.
highlights is that it's not giving us what we need.
Mm,
But really distressingly, 35% of people in that study said that their supervision received was harmful to them. So
yeah.
over a third of people in this particular study felt their supervision was harmful to them. And if it's harmful to them, it's harmful to their client group,
Yeah.
because this is about safeguarding practices as well.
Hmm.
So, so what I really strongly believe that if we can improve the trauma-informed knowledge of the professionals, whichever sector they work in,
Mm,
that will impact the sort of supervision they provide,
mm.
and the quality of that supervision, and therefore really supporting the clients as well. The
Yeah.
safety of work and the client's well-being as well as the supervisee's well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. They go hand in hand. You
Yeah.
can't do one without the other. And
No.
so for you, what would you say trauma-informed supervision looks like or doesn't look like?
Yeah. That's a good question. I suppose what I would say is let's think about what it feels like,
Mm,
because very much trauma-informed work is about really embodied work. It's about really improving our sense of interoception so that we really understand, and we can read ourselves and really understand what we're feeling. So really good quality supervision, first of all, should be something that you look forward to,
Yeah.
not something that you dread. And I can tell you, I have dreaded supervision myself in the past
Mm,
when I've been in contexts which have been bullying or, you know, management bullying, um, too over too much pressure and
hmm
all the things that are out there, everyone's trying to do the best they can. I really strongly believe that. But I think
Yeah.
the power dynamics that often people find themselves in the supervisory relationship can mean that it doesn't look or feel good.
Mm,
So for me, I want you to look forward to coming. I want it to
mhm,
feel like a safe container, really, a space where you can just be open and honest about the challenges that you might be facing with your
mm,
work. Um, we really focus on a building an attachment relationship, which is
mhm,
obviously built on safety and trust, compassion, empathy,
mm.
and that the wisdom that we can lean into, and a real felt sense of what that relationship feels like.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there's work to be done, I think, within the public sector about improving. I mean, some people, I would imagine most people, I don't know about speech and language specifically, but in my experience, people aren't trained in how to supervise.
Yeah.
Generally, they're just promoted and then they're given a client, a
Yeah.
staff group to supervise.
Yeah.
That's really dangerous.
Yeah.
I think if we're thinking about trauma-informed practice, there's
hmm
training to be done around what that is, what it looks and feels like,
hmm
and how to deliver supervision in a really safe way.
Yeah. Because if you haven't sought out extra training and supervision, which, like you say, is not standard, it's not delivered as standard within trusts or schools, if you haven't sought that out and perhaps haven't received
Mm,
very supportive, trauma-informed supervision, where are you going to learn those skills or even know they're
mm,
required? That's
yeah.
part of the reason for this podcast is really to get people thinking about not just the supervision they've had, but what could they have? What might be
Yeah.
useful?
Yeah.
Um,
I truly believe that the good quality, safe, trauma-informed supervision transforms practice, absolutely
mm,
transforms practice, and therefore transforms outcomes for the client group as well.
yeah,
I think, yeah,
absolutely.
it's such a key factor in the work we do. And of
Mm,
course, the reality on the ground, I'm sure your listeners will be aware of this, those that work in the public sector will be, it's often cancelled because people don't prioritize it.
yeah.
When you do have it, your supervisor might sort of screech into the meeting stressed and busy themselves, and it
Mm,
makes us feel like we're being a bit of a nuisance if we bring anything up to discuss.
mm,
Or we might feel like we're being overly judged or watched
mm,
or, criticized for the work we've done. It's a very tender relationship that needs holding with a
mm,
lot of care.
mm,
Supervisors have a lot of power.
mm,
Um, and, to quote, therefore, there's a lot of great responsibility that comes with that. And we need to
mm.
really acknowledge that we do have a lot of power and responsibility in our roles.
Yeah, absolutely. And if someone is out there seeking a new supervisory relationship, what key advice might you give them?
Yeah, I mean, if you're an independent practitioner, of course you've got the freedom to explore, research. I mean, it took me a long time for me to find the right people for my
Mm,
supervision. But I continued researching, asking others, like dipping into trial sessions.
mm,
I would say if you are independent, do your homework, do your research, ask around. Um, Decide what you want, whether you need a speech and language therapist to do supervision? Do you want them to be a trauma-informed practitioner
Mm,
as well, or do you want somebody separate as well as that? So
mm,
work out what you want yourself first, and then find it. And what I would say is, um, the supervisory relationship is key, as you all know.
mm,
So meet that person, get a feel for them, see if it feels
mm,
right for you. Not everyone's right for everybody.
mm,
I've turned away from different people in the past who I thought would be good to supervise me, but actually then I've not felt that it's the
mm,
right relationship for me. So do your homework, I would say. If you are somebody who works in the NHS, for example, or in a different service where you don't have the choice of who your supervisor is, then you might want to think about, well, first of all, raising that question about, I don't feel that my secondary trauma needs are being met. The risk of secondary trauma is great for me. If I mean, I'm thinking, I
mm,
suppose people who might work with youth offending or the prison service or even with children in the care system, you're exposed to high levels of trauma. If your supervisor if the supervision you're receiving doesn't feel like that's helping to mitigate the risks of secondary trauma, bring that up as a conversation. How
mm,
how can we improve this? What else do I need? What can be available? And it might be that you also, I mean, it comes with a cost, but you might financial cost of seeking independent supervision in addition to the supervision you receive. I would say that does come with a financial cost, but the psychological benefits of that in terms of your well-being and your CPD,
mm.
for me, it would be worth it. And
Yeah,
I found that to be really helpful.
yeah, just so valuable. Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you coming on today. If
You're
any
very welcome.
Mhm. If anyone out there is looking for a new supervisor, there's a supervisor register available on the intandem.co.uk website, which can help you search and look, as you say, for the right fit and perhaps
Yeah.
have a trial relationship. Thank you very much for listening.